Linda, nice to have you with us tonight.
Thanks.
Why is China at this torrid pace of testing? What's happening here?
Well, I imagine that they are spurred on by the fact that both the US and Russia are also upping the ante with developing new kinds of nuclear weapons. As we know, the US has $1 trillion budget for nuclear weapons and is talking about so-called low yield, and Russia is talking about these undetectable missiles. So China is feeling a little bit threatened, perhaps, and that could explain this ramping up.
Are we in an arms race, a global arms race? There's 3 superpowers in the game.
Well, there's definitely 2 superpowers in the game. I mean, numerically, obviously, Russia and the US have about 7,000 nuclear weapons each. China has, by all estimations, we don't know exactly, but probably around 270. They're talking about using this testing program to ramp up another 100. That doesn't seem to be, if you buy into deterrence at all, very competitive with those 2 major superpowers. So I think this is much more about posturing, about the ability to show that we're developing a nuclear arsenal, and it makes them, seem more secure, but in reality, it doesn't change anything.
Are they technologically advancing faster than the United States and Russia? How good are the Chinese at this?
That I really don't know. I don't have that kind of inside information, but I would say that given where they're at compared to Russia and the US, it's unlikely. But it really doesn't matter in the end, because how many you have and how advanced they are. I mean, we've talked about this before, that everyone's already got plenty of nuclear weapons to destroy the world many times over, so there's really no need to develop new ones or more weapons.
Are these first strike capability weapons you think they're testing and getting to that level, or is it more of a defensive measure and a reactionary?
According to China, there is no intent to use them as first strike. It's always been about a retaliation, but that rather sort of undermines the whole premise of so-called deterrence. Are you going to actually use them, or are you just going to threaten to use them? If you're never going to use them, are they really a weapon at all? Is there any point? Obviously, I don't think we should have any nuclear weapons, so it makes it all kind of futile. But it's just this kind of jockeying for some sort of position to say, well, we could retaliate if we needed to, but by then it's basically over.
Where is the U.S. development on nuclear weapons right now? Is it at low yield, minimal strikes, but effective? And then, of course, Russia has stepped forward with an undetectable capability. I mean, this is really a new wave in the game, isn't it?
Well, first of all, low yield is sort of this misnomer. It sounds like it's sort of harmless and not as dangerous. And we're talking about 44,000 times a traditional bomb in terms of the explosive yield of one of these so-called low yield nuclear weapons. I was just listening to Senator Ed Markey the other night, who said, low yield is like Salt Lake City nightlife. I mean, it just doesn't exist. It's an illusion to think that somehow you can fight a war with nuclear weapons at all, and certainly with low yield. I mean, the explosive power is enormous. The damage would be immense. And China's talked about, needing them to sort of blow out a whole fleet of aircraft carriers. I mean, you don't need to use a nuclear weapon to do that. All these countries have more than enough conventional power, really, to solve, hopefully there aren't any conflicts, but solve conflicts without resorting to nuclear weapons.
And how long has China been at this pace? Has this been recently, since Trump came in and increased the budget?
Yes, I mean, my understanding is a relatively recent development. Of course, we don't know always a lot that comes out of China. They keep things pretty close to their chest, so it's hard to know for sure.
The United States military has had a lot of experience in the Western Pacific taking down small islands.
A not-so-veiled warning to China to halt its military buildup on contested islands in the South China Sea. Satellite photos show China has placed new surface-to-air missiles in the Spratlys and recently landed nuclear-capable bombers on Woody Island. China calls the accusations ridiculous. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis will reassure allies the U.S. will not allow China to spread its influence unchecked.
There had been a promise in 2015 by the President Xi, where he stated they would not be militarizing the Spratly Islands. We have seen in the last month they have done exactly that.
At a change of command ceremony in Hawaii, the outgoing head of U.S. Pacific Forces, Admiral Harry Harris, a China hawk, issued another warning.
China remains our biggest long-term challenge. Without focused involvement and engagement by the United States and our allies and partners, China will realize its dream of hegemony in Asia. We should cooperate with Beijing where we can, but stand ready to confront them where we must.
Poland is reportedly willing to pay $2 billion for a permanent United States troop presence in the country. Moscow has called the initiative dangerous and says it won't benefit European security. Yulia Shapovalova reports.
The document, dubbed Proposal for U.S. Permanent Presence in Poland by the country's defense ministry, was leaked online at the weekend. The main aim, Warsaw lists for such a force on its soil, is deterrence to Russia's increasingly emboldened and dangerous posture in Europe. Warsaw is ready to pay as much as $2 billion for the deployment of a permanent U.S. military contingent and hopes that will send a clear message to Russia of U.S. protection and support for its Eastern European allies. The documents, leaked about a month ahead of the NATO summit in Brussels, contain detailed maps of the locations where Poland is ready to host U.S. troops. Cities in the heart of the country are said to be the ideal location. Last week, the U.S. Senate called on Defense Secretary Jim Mattis to report on the feasibility and advisability of permanently stationing U.S. forces on Polish soil. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov noted that Poland had a sovereign right to establish a U.S. military base on its territory, stressing that Moscow, in turn, was ready to react to NATO's expansion.
That would not improve security and stability in Europe. Of course, it is a sovereign decision of any country, but the consequences for the general atmosphere on the continent are obvious.
Russian officials added that the deployment of NATO's permanent base makes Poland one of the main targets in case of a possible conflict. NATO has been beefing up its presence in Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, with Moscow regularly portrayed as the aggressor. In March, Poland signed a $4.75 billion deal to buy U.S. air defense Patriot missile systems, while claiming it wants to have friendly relations with its neighbors. Moscow has repeatedly stated that by boosting Western missile defenses on Russia's doorstep, NATO risks undermining regional security.
Now, it's a bit difficult to understand how a permanent military base in Poland would afford the Polish government any more power than it already has, since already there are 4,000 NATO troops stationed in Poland and throughout the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And they rotate throughout those countries, every now and again. And also there's actually military drills going on all over Europe, even on Russia's doorstep, every month actually, going on different places in Europe. One of these annual drills that takes place in Poland is called Baltops, and it's a US-led maritime exercise. It involves the participation of 17 nations. It's got 5,700 troops involved, 42 ships and 2 submarines. But this this military drill is going to look pretty small in comparison to one they have coming up in November. It's called Anaconda, and it's another military drill that takes place in Poland. It happens every 2 years, but this year it's supposed to encompass 10,000 troops in participation from 10 allied nations, and that's all according to the NATO website. So it's difficult to see how even a permanent military base will even increase the likelihood of Poland having any more political swing with Russia.